Hello, Sarah Sabin, executive and team coach here in the Leading in the Modern Way video interview series. And I am excited to have with me here today Andrew Dagnall, who is CEO at Bettorlogic. Andrew, welcome to the show. And would you like to
Thank you, Sarah.
You're welcome. Would you like to briefly introduce yourself to my listeners?
Yeah, certainly. As you said, I'm Andrew Dagnall. I'm the founder of Bettorlogic, and Bettorlogic was a company which I formed about 14, 15 years ago because I perceived there to be a gap in the market that we could fulfill. And I would say that over the 14, 15 years, that I think like a lot of businesses, the business has sort of grown and sort of moved into different directions.
So you've been going for a while now, it's fair to say. When you've said that it's moved in different directions over that time, would you be able to elaborate on what were some of the reasons that you decided to pivot or change direction?
Well, when we started, we were very much a B2C business. Mm-hmm. In that we delivered a service to a subscription base. And then after about 2-3 years, we received significant investment from one particular individual. And as a result of that, we focused much more on becoming a technology company. And a technology company that essentially what we do is we have sports data feeds. And we pivoted the business so that it was directed more towards the B2B market. And that has become our principal market over the last 10 years or so. And that B2B market is the betting and gaming industry. And what we do is we deliver a sports data feed to these companies that enables them to engage with their customers and increase their turnover, and also improve that engagement with customers. Because I don't know if you know much about the particular, it's a strange business, actually, the betting and gaming business, because it's very much what one company offers is very similar to what another betting company offers. And there's any number of different betting companies. There are over probably 500 dotted around the world. And they're all essentially offering the same product. Mm-hmm. And therefore, what they look for is points of differentiation. And that's essentially what our business is focused on.
Okay.
If that makes sense?
Yes, that does make sense. And I'm curious, actually, at the point that you decided to pivot, how difficult was it to transition from B2C to B2B?
Well, I think what we recognised that there were limitations in the B2C market, insofar as we were presenting to our subscription base sort of detailed reports about upcoming sporting events and how they might be able to use that information as far as the markets are concerned. What we realised was that for the majority of those subscribers, who essentially were people who bet, that whilst they were encouraged by the wealth of data that they could obviously see, what they really wanted was a very quick conclusion in terms of what they should do. And therefore, we realized that we needed other routes to get to market. And one of those routes we decided was the actual betting companies, because they had the means of distribution of our product as such to their particular customers. And as a result of that, we became very much more a technology-minded company, because we relied on creating automated feeds. So we invested a lot into our tech stack and the development of products. And that's subsequently has sort of grown over the years in terms of what we offer.
And I just want to pick up on that point because it comes up fairly frequently. What you start with when you start a business often pivots over time as you try one thing and it doesn't quite give you what you need, or it seems like product market fit isn't there. And so having these transition points along the way are things that happen as you get to know your market and what they want and what they need better.
Yes, because it's fair to say that we only knew one part of the market, i.e. people who bet. What we didn't really know was, what we didn't really have much insight into, is to what actually went into the online digital betting business in terms of how those companies actually operated. And it took a bit of time to learn what that was, and also to build up contacts in the marketplace, because I would always say in any business you're in, one of the great strengths of your business has to be the contacts that you have in the particular industry that you operate in. And I think that, because that, I think, it gives you credibility, and I think also it gives your customers confidence in what you're doing. And I think in any new business that takes time to develop.
Yes, 100%. And the phrase comes to mind, your network is your net worth.
Yeah.
But it takes time to build that up.
Exactly. I think, you have to get to know people, and people have to get to know what you're doing and what value you can bring to their particular business. And therefore, I think, in the modern world, it's a lot easier now to build up a network, certainly, than it would have been 14, 15 years ago, if only because of the strength of things like LinkedIn, etc., for example.
Yes.
So that has proved to be that's proved to be invaluable.
So I'm curious now, Andrew, what's the most pressing thing on your mind at the moment? So if you could take some magical pixie dust and sprinkle it on something that's been bothering you, what would that be at the moment?
I would say, because of developments over the last 5 years in terms of legislation, the US market has become a massive market. Because it was only 5 years ago that effectively betting became legal in the States. And I think probably one of the most pressing challenges we have is how to establish ourselves in that particular market. Because I think, I may be wrong, but I think US businesses tend to be quite parochial, in the sense that they don't like so much to have a dependence, in particular on a European company, in terms of supply. So I think it's being able to break into that market. And I think what you have to have really is you have to have troops on the ground. And I think operating a remote office is certainly more challenging than it is to have an office where you are actually located. So that would probably be the biggest challenge we have at the moment.
Yes, I do agree with you that it can be a challenge to break into a new geographical market. I will say that it's certainly becoming easier than it used to be, because we're now more used to remote working and remote first working.
Yeah.
However, in highly regulated industries, there's that extra hump there.
Yes, there is. Whether it's regulation or licensing. I mean, we've always been quite successful in terms of operating in other global markets, like the Far East, for example, or Europe or Eastern Europe. But I think the US has different conditions and a different mindset.
Would you like to elaborate on some of those conditions that are different in the US market?
Well, I think because the nature of our particular businesses, I mean, if you took a big company, for example, like William Hill as an example, right? One of the biggest bookmakers over here. In the digital space, they probably only have control or own about 80% of their digital business. It's the way the business is made up, in the sense that you have on any given day, you'll have 1,000 events, etc., and companies they rely on third parties to be able to effectively create their product that they offer in the digital space. And therefore, when the US opened up, there was a mad race to get a sportsbook product up as quickly as possible to grab market share. And the only way they could do that was they had to rely on European suppliers to provide them with software, which meant they could operate a sportsbook in the US. One knew that as time went on, they wouldn't like to feel beholden to a European supplier. They would like to create their own suppliers because of different market conditions and understandings, etc. So they've now been preoccupied with doing that. And then it's at the end of this stage that they start to look around and think, what do we need to be able to create a stickiness with our customers? Mm-hmm. And I suppose because we also do what I would call customer profiling based on anonymous data. And I think if you compared what we do or what the bookmaking business is, you can compare it to digital music. I get the same music track, 8-9 different sources. There's no difference. So what I have to do is I have to create a brand loyalty. I have to provide a product that satisfies me as an individual user in terms of user experience. And that's now the direction towards which the betting business is moving. I.e., they know your behavior, they know what you like to do, they know how you react when you do well and how you react when you do badly. And we've also developed on our side, because problem gambling over here is a big issue. We've also developed the software that can detect at a very early stage whether somebody is likely to become a problem gambler. And that will have real value for the industry because, as I say, it is such a big feature over here, and it will become a very big feature in the US as well.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, if I was to summarize, what I'm hearing is now that you're at a stage where the US are starting to kind of get that US-based supplier or suppliers, it's incumbent upon you to think about, okay, what else can we create that's going to be of value to the US market later down the line?
Exactly.
Okay.
Very good stuff.
Thank you. It's one of my superpowers, Andrew.
Very good.
I'd love to know more about your take on leadership. So how do you personally define strong leadership, and how do you see it impacting the growth of your company?
Well, I think, certainly as far as employees are concerned, I think they like to have a clear direction in terms of where the business is going. I think it's important that they should respect what you're doing, and or equally on my side to respect what they're doing. So I would say that my style more is I will give people latitude. I'll give them a framework in terms of what I expect from them, but I won't micromanage. And equally, what I tend to do is, depends what stage an employee is at, but every 3-6 months I'll have a good chat with them and I'll say, look, how are you finding it, and how do you think you can improve? But equally, I think also, what do you want to do in the future? And I'll be quite honest with some people, and I'll say to them, look, I think that perhaps maybe this isn't a business that necessarily suits you, or potentially it's a career path that I think you might become slightly frustrated with, and in which case I'll support them in terms of moving forward, may well be in another direction. We have an office in India, which is run by my CTO, who also is Indian, and I just let him run that effectively completely on his own, because that's essentially what he wants to do, and he reports back to me in terms of how things are going, etc. But I certainly, leave it up to him to be able to show his entrepreneurial skills in terms of managing that particular office.
So I'm hearing a few things here. Number one, say to employees the what, not the how. So tell them what you want and what you expect of them, but not how to do that. And number two, seeing an employee as a two-way street. So give your employee what they want, and they're more likely to give you what you want. And if there is a misalignment there, then actually sometimes it can make sense for that employee to move on. And it makes sense from both sides.
Yeah. I mean, I will test them to the extent of saying, if you, let's say, for argument's sake, you want to go off and do a course in this, or you want to go off and do a course in that, we will support you. And then it's a test to the extent of seeing whether or not they actually grasp that and pick up that mantle and actually want to do it. Because I certainly think, I mean, the majority of people who we employ are called relatively young, they're sort of under 30. And I think that, I know I found it when I was that age, things like time management is actually quite difficult until you actually get to know, right, okay, this is what I need to do now, and this is what I should be doing sort of to complete by this week, etc., etc. So I think it's trying to sort of help them grow in terms of being an effective worker as well.
And I actually kind of like the concept of testing people out, because you can give people the tools that will help them to grow.
Yeah.
However, what you can't do is make them use those tools. So the analogy I have in mind is you can bring a horse to water, you can't make it
exactly.
So whether that employee uses those tools or not gives you some indication as to their character.
Yeah, I think you can normally tell, I think, relatively quickly what sort of person you've employed. And it always slightly surprises me that the person you actually employ sometimes is quite different to the person who you actually interviewed or went through the whole process of interviewing. Because I think it's a way they demonstrate their abilities, over a relatively short period of time that actually tells you a great deal about
100%. Proof of the pudding is in the eating.
Exactly.
So, Andrew, how have you invested in yourself as a leader, and what steps do you take to grow and evolve in your role?
Very good question. I'll be honest, I've never really sort of, I've been to sort of various conferences and sort of what are called sort of leaders summit type conferences, where you have very respected people from different industries talking about their experience and what their leadership skills are. And I've always found those actually quite fascinating and also quite useful. And I've picked up quite a few things from that. So I would say that's in terms of actual growth. But I suppose, I would consider that I'm always learning, to be honest. And I think learning different, I would certainly say that, well, I'd like to think that what I know now compared to 30 years ago is very different. And I think one's approach to business, and I think particularly, I've done, I think, probably sort of 3 startups. And I think that what I know now about trying to get a business off the ground, I'd say is very different to what I knew then.
Yeah, and when I talk to serial entrepreneurs, they usually say something along those lines. The way I've approached my 2nd, 3rd, 4th business, whatever it happens to be, is very different from the first one. And I think that's testament to the fact that, when you're learning in the process of doing, not always in the process of actually actively reading or doing courses or mentorship or whatever, although that's another way to learn as well. Some people learn much better by the actual doing, experimenting, failing, changing, pivoting process.
Exactly.
Okay, final question, Andrew. If you could go back in time and ask or give one piece of advice to your 20-year-old self, what would that piece of advice be?
I think it would be I think when you start a business, right, and you have a very clear idea of what the business is going to do, and you do your 3-year plan and etc., etc., I think what I would certainly say is that whatever investment I thought I needed, I would double. And I think because I think that when you do start a new business, I think you tend to look at it slightly with rose-tinted glasses and think it's going to, take off much quicker than it actually does, etc., etc. And I think also that, realistically, if you're raising £1 million or £5 million, there's not a lot of difference in terms of attracting investment. But I think certainly what I learned was that by trying to be, at the time, perhaps too realistic, I can think of one occasion I didn't raise enough money, and that places strain on the business. And you can then spend, you have great faith in the business, but you can spend so much time just trying to keep it going that actually it hinders you in terms of your actual progress.
100%. This is an absolutely really valuable point, and I want to kind of summarize that as well. You always need more investment than you think you will, and you always need more time than you think you will as well.
Yeah.
And that also comes into the fundraising process, because, when I'm talking to companies, leaders of those companies, and they say to me, right, so we're planning to raise X amount in the next 6 months, I always take that 6 months and double it.
Yeah.
And of course, because it takes longer, what can inevitably happen is you're leaving yourself very short runway wise, because it's taking longer than you had anticipated.
Exactly.
So I very much like your approach of, actually ask for more to begin with and give yourself slightly more leeway to get there.
Exactly.
Okay.
Because I think also because you can be too dogmatic as well. And I think quite often you say, right, this is what I'm going to do. This is what I need to make it work. And this is how it's going to work. And therefore, perhaps you don't quite take on board what people say to you at the time, nor, as I say, most fundamentally, you don't raise enough money.
Yes, I'm going to finish on that point, Andrew. Thank you
Thank you
so
very
much for this conversation today.
Thank you.
And to my listeners, I hope that you enjoyed this conversation as well. If you would like to take part in the Leading in a Modern Way video interview series, please do reach out to me. Bye for now.